Even better, right? um, I was talking about increasing the amount of sacred in our lives the other day, and I had another really cool conversation with the same person who enlightened me about that idea, about the notion that that practices like yoga and sacred practices can recalibrate us in relation to our day. And what a great, I just really struck by that idea, this notion of recalibration in the context of how we experience everything else that happens after we take up that recalibration practice. And it got me thinking about something else, or it actually linked to a thing that I was going to throw out today to ponder. And it has to do with something that I've heard about, a new invention that's going to be implanted in your head. That and the big thing that was thrown out in the context of this notion was that it might be able to cure blindness. Now, I've not had a lot of experience with people who are blind. As a matter of fact, I can think of one person in particular who was a student of mine who was blind from birth, and I'm not suggesting that people who have vision loss couldn't benefit. That's not what I'm talking about. It's the idea that this person who was blind from birth would consider the notion of being cured of her blindness as the same as me being blinded intentionally. That her blindness was not a problem or a disability. Her blindness was part of who she was. And that a shift from that, and it's actually been, there's been a fair amount of documentation of situations where people who are blind from birth, who are then given sight, have a very difficult time with it. And it's not this miraculous, wonderful thing where everything's all of a sudden awesome, because the idea that if you are blind from birth and you're no longer no longer blind, that everything is awesome, suggests the notion that sight is normal. Now, maybe it is, don't know. But what I'm saying is when we normalize things like that, we're creating sort of this, what I describe as the one right outcome notion, where the only good thing that could possibly happen is X, where we are cured when we are changed in certain ways. And there's a lot out there about curing us because we're changed in certain ways that's very, very difficult and problematic in the context of things like sexual orientation. And but it all goes back to this notion of this one right outcome, that there are certain trajectories towards which we are supposed to go, and alternatives are not okay. And the problem about that, at least for me in the context of what we're currently dealing with, is it creates a lot of, it problemizes everything or problematizes everything. Suggests that going through hard times is just the wrong thing. It should never have happened. That things getting back to normal is the only possible way that we could go in this current situation, which is not ever going to happen. So then it creates a perpetual invitation to failure. I recently released a song, and it's not really important about the song unless you can listen to it. It's called You Will Find Your Way. But the most important thing about that song is the kind of lesson that I learned from sort of channeling the song, that hard times are where we learn, and going through things that are sort of off the beaten path are how we learn about what's off the beaten path. And this notion that everything goes in sort of one continuous direction always, and that's the only way that anything could ever be good, is really a really problematic kind of way to think about things, and can create all kinds of problems. And so it's just something to think about. So the idea of recalibrating in order to experience our lives differently, and then this notion of thinking about this one right outcome notion, that luck, or you're really lucky if that happens, or all these certain things ultimately create a real narrow perspective on life and what's possible and what we gain from the chances that we take, and also the risks that we take. And that ultimately much of what's awesome about my life happened is a result of those difficult times and those difficult places. So something to think about. Hope everybody's having a great day. I'm going to be doing a live stream in about, 5 minutes from now of music. If you're interested in that, tune in then. Otherwise, I'll talk to you tomorrow. This is What's Next with Dr. Joel.